The first thing you notice walking into an Australian primary school isn't the kids. It's the silence of what's missing. There's no metal detector. There's no armed officer at the front desk. There's no buzzer system, no bulletproof glass, no sign-in kiosk that takes your photograph and runs it against a database. You just walk in. A teacher waves at you from down the hallway. A kid in bare feet runs past you carrying a tray of muffins he baked that morning. And somewhere in your American brain, a small alarm goes off that says, this is not how schools are supposed to feel. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 11 things American parents notice the moment they step inside an Australian school. The one detail at item number 7 that made my own mother put her hand over her mouth. The cost comparison that nearly made my brother-in-law book a flight to Sydney that same week. And the conversation I had with a grandmother in Brisbane that completely rewired how I think about what childhood is supposed to feel like. But the part that genuinely caught me off guard, and the reason I almost didn't post this video at all, comes near the end. It's something a 68-year-old Aussie grandfather said to me on a school oval while we watched his granddaughter play cricket. He said it casually, almost like he was apologizing for it. And once I heard it, I couldn't stop thinking about the country I came from. So let's start with the door, or rather, the lack of one. In most American public schools today, a parent has to be buzzed in through a reinforced steel entrance, scanned, photographed, and badged before they're allowed to walk to their own child's classroom. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, 97% of American public schools now use locked or controlled entry systems. That number was around 70% in 2009. It went up because of what happened at Sandy Hook and Uvalde and Parkland and Nashville and the dozens of others we've stopped naming. In Australia, you walk in. You sign a clipboard if it's a formal visit. Sometimes you don't even do that. The school I visited in Newcastle had a sign on the office door that said, "Please pop in, the kettle's on." I read that sign 3 times. I genuinely did not understand it as an American. The idea that a school office would offer a parent a cup of tea was so foreign to me that I assumed it was a joke or maybe a community event flyer left up too long. It wasn't. That's just how the office runs. If you're an American parent watching this, the first thing your gut tells you walking through an Australian primary school is that something has gone very wrong somewhere, and it's not here. That feeling builds with every step, and it sits with you for days afterward. The second thing American parents notice almost immediately is the feet. Australian kids walk around school barefoot. Not all of them, not all the time, but enough that as an American, you do a double take. They kick their shoes off in the morning, they leave them at the classroom door, and they walk on the grass during recess like it's the most normal thing in the world. Because to them, it is. My niece in Atlanta is not allowed to take her shoes off during recess. There's a written policy. The Australian policy is watch out for Bendis. That's it. That's the rule. The third thing they notice is the uniform. Now, American kids in public school wear whatever the family budget and Target's clearance rack allow. Some kids show up in $200 sneakers. Some show up in shoes that don't fit. The class hierarchy is visible from across the cafeteria. In an Australian public primary school, every kid wears the same polo, the same shorts, the same hat. The same hat. Which brings me to thing number 4, and I have to tell you, this is the one that made my American sister text me, "Wait, what? No hat, no play." That's the rule. If a kid forgets their broad-brimmed sun hat, they sit under the covered area at recess. They don't run. They don't play sport. They sit. Australian schools take skin cancer that seriously because Australia has the highest rate of melanoma in the world, and the country decided 40 years ago that this was a child safety issue. Full stop. The Cancer Council of Australia and SunSmart programs run in over 95% of primary schools. There is no debate. There is no parent showing up to a school board meeting screaming about hat freedom. The hat goes on or you sit down. End of conversation. Now, here's where I want to plant something for later, because I promise you a moment near the end that genuinely stopped me, and the seed of it gets planted right here. When American parents see this level of casual, unargued, common sense protection for kids, they start asking themselves a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. I'll come back to it. The fifth thing American parents notice is the canteen. Now, in America, a school cafeteria is a logistics operation. It's frozen pizza, vacuum-sealed chicken nuggets, a milk carton, and a tray that gets handed to a kid in 9 seconds flat. In Australia, the canteen is run by parents. Volunteer parents. They bake. They make sandwiches in the morning. They run a green amber red traffic light system mandated by state health guidelines, where most of the food on offer has to be from the green category. Fresh fruit, sushi rolls, salad wraps, pasta. The kids order their lunch on a paper bag they wrote their name on with a crayon, and a parent volunteer fills it. I watched a woman named Linda at a school in Wollongong slice up watermelon for 200 kids on a Wednesday morning. She wasn't paid. She wasn't being filmed for a documentary. She just does it every Wednesday because her grandson goes to that school. And when I asked her why, she shrugged and said, "Well, who else is going to do it?" That sentence is the entire Australian school system in one line. If you got kids, grandkids, or you're just trying to understand why Australian families are doing it differently, subscribe. That's a big part of what this channel covers. I dig into the small details that add up to a completely different version of childhood. And I think a lot of you watching already feel it in your bones. You just haven't seen someone lay it out side by side. The sixth thing American parents notice is what isn't there. There's no Pledge of Allegiance. Australian kids don't put their hand on their heart and recite a pledge to the flag every morning. They don't do active shooter drills. They don't have lockdown procedures pinned to the classroom wall. There's no inspirational poster about resilience next to a poster showing where to hide if a man with a rifle comes through the door. American teachers are now required, in many states, to train children as young as 5 on what to do if a gunman enters the building. According to the Washington Post school shootings tracker, more than 350,000 American children have experienced gun violence at school since Columbine in 1999. In Australia, the last school shooting was, well, it wasn't. There hasn't been one in any way comparable to the American experience because of the National Firearms Agreement that John Howard pushed through after Port Arthur in 1996. The Australian government bought back 650,000 firearms. And every American parent who walks into an Australian school feels the absence of that fear in a way that's almost physical. They don't know what they're feeling at first. Then they realize they're feeling what school is supposed to feel like. Now we get to item number 7, and this is the one I told you about. This is the one that made my own mother, who came to visit me from Ohio last September, put her hand over her mouth in the school office. It was the bill, or more accurately, the absence of one. My friend's daughter goes to a public primary school in Brisbane. The total annual cost, the voluntary contribution they pay for the entire school year, including books, technology levy, excursions, the whole package, was 340 Australian dollars. For the year, my sister in Cincinnati pays $800 a year just for after-school care. Per child. Per semester. My mother looked at the printed receipt, looked at me, looked back at the receipt, and said, "That can't be the whole year." And I said, "Mom, that's the whole year." Now, compare that to America. The average American family with 2 kids in school pays around $14,000 a year out of pocket, once you factor in supplies, fees, technology, lunches, after-school programs, and the constant stream of fundraisers asking you to sell wrapping paper to your neighbors so the school can buy printer paper. In Australia, public primary education is genuinely, functionally free. State-funded. Universal. Not a luxury, not a lottery, not a postcode prison. Just a school. Down the road. That works. The 8th thing American parents notice is how the kids talk to teachers. They use first names sometimes. Not always. It varies by school. But in many Australian primary schools, the kids call the teacher Miss Sarah or Mr. Tom. There's a warmth there that American parents don't expect. The teachers aren't authority figures behind a desk. They're adults who know your kid's name, know your kid's brother, and probably saw you at the local Coles on Saturday. And the kid talks to them like a human, not a guard. The 9th thing is the playground. Australian school playgrounds have actual risk in them. There's a concept in Australian early childhood education called risky play, and it's deliberate. Kids climb things. They balance on logs. They swing high. There's research from Macquarie University and the University of Western Sydney that shows children who engage in moderate physical risk during play develop better motor skills, better judgment, and lower anxiety. American playgrounds got sued into being soft, flat, and boring. Australian playgrounds still have trees. Real ones that kids climb, and the teachers don't run over screaming, they just keep an eye out. I want to be honest about something here, because this isn't a propaganda video, and I'm not going to pretend Australian schools are perfect. They're not. There are funding fights between public and private. There are remote indigenous communities where the schools are genuinely struggling and have been failed for generations. There are issues with teacher burnout, with NAPLAN testing, with the gap between wealthy private schools in Sydney's eastern suburbs and a public school in Western Sydney. Australians know all of this. You're not getting a glossy postcard from me. But I'll tell you what, even the worst Australian public primary school I visited still felt safer, calmer, and more humane than the average American one. And that's not me trashing America. That's just what I saw. The 10th thing American parents notice is the pace. Australian primary school days are not a cortisol factory. The kids have a fruit break in the morning. They have recess. They have a proper lunch break, often an hour. They go outside multiple times a day in actual weather for actual minutes. They're not sitting at a desk for 6 straight hours filling in test prep bubbles. The Australian curriculum, set by ACARA, includes mandated outdoor and physical activity time. American recess in many states has been quietly cut down to 15 minutes, or in some cases, eliminated entirely so the kids can do more standardized testing. I'm not making that up. The Center for Disease Control reported that around 40% of American school districts have reduced recess time in the last 15 years. So here's an honest question for you, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll. If you had to pick which version of childhood your grandkid grew up in, the American version or the Australian version, what would you pick? I think I know what most of you would say, but I want to hear it. And I think most American parents, if they were being honest with themselves, would say the same thing. They might not say it on Facebook, but they'd say it quietly to their wife in the car on the way home. Now, about that grandfather in Brisbane. This is the 11th thing, and it's the one I told you about at the start. His name was Ron. He was 68 years old, retired electrician, 3 grandkids in the local public school. We were standing on the edge of the school oval watching his granddaughter Ella play a game of indoor cricket during what they called sport afternoon. The sun was going down. Magpies were carrying on in the gum trees behind us, and was telling him about this video, telling him what American parents see when they walk through a school like the one his granddaughter was running around on. He listened for a while. Then he looked at me, and he said something I'm going to repeat exactly because I wrote it down in my notes that night. He said, "Mate, we don't think we're doing anything special. We just think this is what looking after your kids looks like. And I think the rest of the world just stopped doing it." I stood there for a second. I didn't know what to say. Because here's the thing, and this is where it stopped being a video about schools for me. Australians don't see this as an achievement. They don't see the affordable public education, the no-shoe playgrounds, the parent-run canteens, the bare feet, the broad-brim hats, the fearless walk through the front office. They don't see it as something to be proud of. They see it as the baseline, the minimum, the absolute floor of what a country owes its kids. And for an American parent walking through that floor for the first time, the floor feels like the ceiling. I started this video by telling you the first thing American parents notice is the silence of what's missing. I want to end it by telling you the last thing they notice, the thing they don't notice until they're back in their hotel room that night, calling their husband or their wife or their sister and trying to put it into words. The last thing they notice is that the kids look like kids. Not little workers, not little soldiers, not little test scores, just kids running around with grass stains on their uniforms, dirt on their feet, a hat strap hanging off their chin, laughing about nothing in particular in a country that decided a long time ago that this was the point. I covered something connected to this in another video on this channel about how Australian retirees experience their grandkids' lives compared to Americans, and if this one hit you in any way, that one will too, because they're really the same story told from opposite ends of the family. But for tonight, I just want to leave you with what Ron said, because I haven't been able to shake it. We don't think we're doing anything special. We just think this is what looking after your kids looks like. Australia, you might be the only country left that still believes that. And I think you should hold on to it with both hands because the rest of us forgot, and we're paying for it in ways we can't even count anymore.